Hello all, Kathy here. This PowerPoint introduces the Image Extension Project, and I'm going to start by showing you the work of artist Jennifer De Laurenti, who has created some images by extending photographs. And you can see here that although she's matched the values rather artfully, the photograph is only a small part of the piece, and she has extended it to sort of imagine what the rest of the background might look like. We're going to look at several of these here. You see again that she has very, very carefully matched the values, in other words, how dark and how light her marks are, to make the landscape in this photograph appear imaginarily larger. Here you see she's simply taken a photograph of a person and extended the landscape. Show you a couple more examples here. So in this one, we see that the artist has extended the lines of the landscape out. This is not exactly what I'm going to be asking you to do in this assignment. I want you to be inspired by the very, very nice close value matching and the extension of the lines, but you're going to be required to do a much larger drawing relative to your photographs so that more of the imaginary work will be yours. I'd also like you to get a little bit more interest into the rest of the piece and to push your imaginations a little bit further by adding a surreal element to this piece. Let's look at some famous artists of the Surrealism movement. This is a mid-20th century art movement. Salvador Dali is one of the most well-known proponents, and there are many, many different styles of Surrealism, but the name of the movement, Surrealism, tells you that this is sort of a raised or a super aspect of reality, so that there will usually be elements in the painting that are very familiar to us from real life, but they may be combined in ways that seem a little dreamlike or spooky. Dali, of course, has his clocks melting here, and we're going to look also at René Magritte, a French surrealist who had a much sort of drier and more formal way of painting perhaps than Dali, but combined images in ways that are very unexpected. Giorgio de Chirico, an Italian surrealist, it's often difficult to put your finger quite on what makes his paintings look a little bit creepy or otherworldly. Often I think it has to do with the very strong shadows, and he will, not so much in this painting, but he will often have shadows that are cast by a building, a person, a critter that's outside of the frame so that you can't exactly tell, but the shadows, I think, give his paintings a very strong, surreal feel. So I'm going to show you some examples of student work on this project, and in each of these we'll look just quickly at some of the criteria that we're going to be looking for, because I think this will help you to select your photograph. That's going to be your first step. You're going to be looking for a photograph somewhere in the 3 by 5 range, about 3 inches by 5 inches, because you're going to be working on a drawing that's approximately 18 by 24. You'll have some leeway on this, but the photos that I'm going to show you of student work here will give you a fairly good idea, I think, of the scale of the photograph to the drawing that I'm looking for. So here, a lovely job on value matching. This student chose to work in charcoal so that she could meet that very, very strong black and white value range of her original image here. Did a really nice job with an eraser here, getting that feeling of the fog or the smoke. I think it's fog here. And of course her surreal element, the pterodactyls. This student really exercised his or her two-point perspective in this one. And of course the surreal element is the insertion of the space needle here. This is a wonderfully imaginative take on this project, and here you see the original photograph may have been taken by the artist, him or herself, looks as if it were captured with a fisheye lens, and then the elements in the rest of the composition look as if they're reflected in a human eye, which is quite artfully drawn. And here's a little bit of the same feeling, although this photograph wasn't taken in a fisheye lens. It's inserted into the idea of a water drop, and you see those distortions that make us feel that we're looking at a water drop on the edges of the drop itself. There's a lovely little shadow here that's cast so that you feel that water drop as a physical object. Here's a very imaginative extension, very, very careful by someone who had a great eye for architectural detail of this hotel. And here, of course, the surreal element is that on the other side of the street, there's some kind of apocalyptic withering of the trees going on. Here's an extension of a postcard that I wouldn't have thought was very promising. I really think it's a good idea for, this is a vintage postcard or photograph, I suppose, and I think it's a good idea to look for something that gives you a little bit more for your imagination to work on in terms of the extension. And yet I have to say, I love this composition, and I think the student did an excellent job on it. Here's a very expressive example of this assignment. This one was done on black paper, and if you have access to black or toned paper for this, you are welcome to use it. It may make it easier to match the value range of a very dark photo, or photo that has a very wide value range as this one does. Here is a lovely extension, very delicate and imaginative, showing a sort of a meta drawing. And I'd like you to think, as you look at these, of the expressiveness of the different approaches that students have taken. This student extended 2 photographs, and if you really are interested in kind of pursuing this project to the nth degree, that is something I'm very, very willing to have you do. Maybe check it out with me before you start, and make sure that you rough draft this well. Very rich element of detail, very expressive here. And this one, there's wonderful extension of the cropland here in the farm and of the value range and textures here, but then, of course, a brilliantly expressive setting for that whole image extension. This one, I think, is a very, very challenging and improbable extension, but it worked out to be a wonderful piece. We are going to be exploring ink wash. This was created using a lot of ink wash besides some charcoal and some pencil. The ink wash, again, provides a really, really nice way to match some very, very dark values. Here, on the other hand, you have an elegantly serene mood being expressed through this image extension. This temple, or whatever it is here, has become a candle, and the smoke from the candle is very, very artfully created with an eraser over graphite and charcoal. And here again we have an extension that is quite imaginative. Lovely poetic feel to this piece. So again, as you look for your photograph, make sure that you look, you're going to be looking for something that has a good value range in black and white. If you have vintage postcards, that's a wonderful source of imagery for this. But obviously most people don't, and there's such a wealth of images on the web that I'm sure you'll be able to find some wonderful stuff there. I would like you to choose 3 images that you think you can extend. So you're going to be looking for objects that you can easily extend, perspective lines, perhaps lines of landscape that you can extend. You want to find an image that sparks your imagination a little bit and shows you in some way an idea for how you might extend this into an imaginary setting yourself. And your first step, of course, as you'll see in the assignment as you explore further, is to take these 3 images and spending maybe 15 or 20 minutes on each one, lay out a rough draft on newsprint, exploring how you might extend that image. And we'll be looking at those together very soon.